G'day team, welcome back. Russell here, Prime Motion Training. Thanks for joining me. This is episode number 9 of Let's Talk Police Applications. Let's dive straight into it. Okay, so we're going to continue on with our theme around interviews and questions and answers that you might need to think about when it comes time to do a psychological interview or a selection panel interview as part of your application. Now, another question that I get regularly from applicants who are preparing themselves for interviews is, can I use the same experience twice when answering questions? Can I use the same experience twice when I'm answering questions? Well, the short answer is yes, you can. But the next question is, well, how or why are we able to do that? How could we use the same experience twice when we're answering questions? We don't want to use the same answer twice, but you certainly can draw from the same experience, in fact multiple times, to answer certain questions. The thing to remember is that you're not going to share the whole experience more than once. In fact, you're not going to share the whole experience even once. What we'll do is we'll select that part, that section or that slice, if you like, of an experience that is relevant to the question, and we'll share that relevant part. Because what we need to do is we need to match the part of your experience that is relevant to what it is that they're asking for. And we need to focus in on that part. So, for example, if the question was around where you've had to use good communication skills to get yourself out of a challenging situation, you might think that I can match that with an experience I've had when I travelled overseas. So let's quickly look at travelling overseas as an experience. You would first have to do some planning and some organising, accommodation, flights, and maybe get some money exchanged before you leave. All of these sort of things you would need to plan and organise and do before you actually left. Now, when you first get overseas, you land, you're trying to find your hotel or whatever it might be, and maybe you've landed somewhere where English is not a first language or their language is not your first language, and you're finding it difficult to communicate. Maybe you eventually find your hotel room, and then when you get there, there's some type of conflict with a local. Maybe you upset somebody and you didn't even realise how you did that. Maybe you've insulted them by something that you did innocently, without understanding what the problem was that you created. And so you managed to eventually resolve this problem with this local. And then maybe after a while you get really sick, you've got food poisoning or something like that, and you start to think, gee, I've made the wrong decision here, I shouldn't have gone. And you're really struggling, and you have to show some resilience to get through that difficult period. Maybe after that you come to a decision. Should I go home now? I'm not feeling that great anymore. Or should I continue on and enjoy the rest of my holiday and try and make the most of it? So all of that happens in one experience, and you could summarize that by saying, hey, I went overseas and spent 2 weeks traveling around, but I got sick and didn't really get the full benefit from my holiday. But that's a whole experience. But we're focusing on one small section of that experience that matches the question. And if you remember the question, it was about when you've had to communicate in a challenging situation. It may be that you then focus in on that part of your experience that provides the best evidence of that skill, the communication skill. So you wouldn't bother adding what I would refer to as extra herbs and spices to your answer. You're not going to spend time talking about what you did to organise yourself and plan and sort of make that initial decision to travel overseas and all of the things you did to get it organised. You're not going to bother talking about when you were sick and how resilient you were to get through that, etc., because that's not what the question's about. So we don't throw those extra herbs and spices in there to try to make it sound good. Instead, we focus in on just that part of the experience where you were able to show really good communication skills in a challenging situation, because that's what the question's about, and so that's where we need to focus our effort. And so it may be that you get another question later on that talks about resilience and when you might have shown resilience. This is where you can refer back to the same experience. Now, they're not asking you the same question, so you're certainly not going to give the same answer, but you can draw on the same experience, except this time you're going to focus in more on the section that relates to resilience. So you would briefly explain that you were traveling overseas, you were in a different country, you went out for a meal and you became very ill, you ended up in hospital, and then you could go on about how difficult and challenging it was for you, and then explain what steps you took that helped you cope with that particular situation. What was it that you did that would give evidence of your resilience? And so we're not talking about what you did in terms of planning the trip to begin with and exchanging money or anything like that. You're not even talking about the conflict that you might have been involved in or the communication that you needed to find your hotel. They're not asking about that this time. They're asking about resilience. So again, we don't want to throw those extra herbs and spices in there and provide additional detail that's outside of that core, I suppose the core of the question. What is that key focus that they have in their question? If it's communicating in a challenging situation, we focus on that part of the experience. If they want to hear about resilience, we slide along the experience timeline to when you had to show resilience, and we focus on the resilience part and everything that happened around that part of your experience. So it's really important that you don't throw in extra herbs and spices, because what happens is you end up telling this really long story where only a small section is really relevant to what they're looking for. And so by knowing your experiences really, really well, you can slice those experiences up into different sections, into smaller components, and then be able to identify, well, what's a good match for this part of my experience where I had to communicate well? What's a good match for where I had to do all that planning and organizing before I left? What about making the decision to return home after not feeling so well, or staying on and enjoying the rest of the holiday? Maybe I focus in on that. How can you slice up your experiences into smaller sections? When you've done that, then match those slices, if you like, those smaller sections to different core values or skills that are likely to come up in your interview. And if you know your experiences really, really well, you'll be able to identify the right slice or section of your experience. You'll be able to match that to the question that they're asking without throwing in extra herbs and spices. And that way you'll provide really good evidence of what it is that they're looking for, what they're asking you for. And if you can do that when you're preparing, know your experiences really well, slice them up into smaller sections, match them up to keywords or core elements like leadership and communication skills, resilience, making decisions, handling confrontation, all these things that you may have to provide evidence of. They're the things that we want to match up your experiences to. In the end, it comes down to your ability to give them evidence of the skills and qualities that you have. And we want to focus in on the experiences, specifically the part of the experience that provides that evidence. Righto, as always guys, I hope you found that helpful. If you do have any questions or you would like to make a comment about what we've discussed today, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we'll get on to episode number 10 in the next chat, where we'll continue on this theme of talking about preparing for interviews as part of a police application. Until then, take care and talk to you soon.